which is great. Thank you for doing that, Ha. In the interest of time, it's 7:03, and I know that we'll likely get some other members of the public that'll chime in as we go. And I know that our newest member, Kristen, will try to hop on in probably 5 or 10 minutes, so we can save the balloons in the celebration of welcoming her then. But thank you everyone for being here and for your forbearance as we worked out some technical difficulties at the last meeting. I was particularly frustrated because it took us so long to get back together, and we were having a great conversation, and we had to stop it for right reasons. But I know that I'm not alone in that frustration. So I'm hopeful we can have a good, robust meeting today and share some really important things that have been going on in the town. There's been a lot happening, and I want to make sure we give that ample airtime. But to retrace our footsteps just a little bit, we do have to approve last meeting's minutes again.
Even before that, you got to take roll call.
You got to take roll call. Very good. Thank you, Matt. All right.
But there it is.
Yes, indeed. So, Andrea, are you still good to take the minutes for this meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. Awesome.
I'm ready.
Okay, ready to go. So, in attendance today, we got, let's see here. So wait, Matt, usually on Zoom, do I call out the people, or do they,
I think either if people just identify themselves, that's
Great.
The key thing. Yeah.
Great. So, Rob Monroe, I am here. We can go down on my list. We got G. Orloff, Andrea Fonserrada, Rose Kratzley, Ha Ritzman. These are the 5 members of the commission, which gives us a quorum. And then we had, looks like Cynthia Rainey is here. Hi, Cynthia.
The school committee liaison.
Very good. And Tanya, it's good to see you, Tanya. And then, of course, not last but certainly not least, Matt Johnson, a liaison. So great. We'll make sure those are reflected in the minutes. So thank you. So item number 2 is the approval of last meeting's minutes, which we approved at the last meeting, but we're going to do it all over again for this meeting in minutes. So hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to take a look through those. Is there any discussion about those minutes or any amendments that need to be made? Okay. So I'll call on each person individually so that they can give their vote to approve that. So I'll start with G.
Approved.
Okay, Andrea.
Approved.
Thank you. Rose.
Approved.
Okay. Ha, can you hear me?
Yes, approved.
Thank you. I approve as well. All right, so move. There we go. So thank you. We'll hold off on introducing new members to the committee until our newest member does show up, and we can take time to acknowledge that. But I did want to start effectively where we ended off at the last meeting, which is the ongoing conversation involving MECO families and our school district. Obviously, many of us have been involved in conversations as citizens, and some folks here who have children in the district. And so I was hoping, and Ha, if you're able to help offer some thoughts here, that's great. Just to help to frame that conversation as we get started with that. All right. You may not be able to do that, which is perfectly fine. So I guess, Rose, at the last meeting, you had offered some thoughts on that, and I wonder if you want to continue that conversation and give us some started off, I guess.
I just definitely want to leave space for the education subcommittee to lead first. I'm happy to chime in. I have several thoughts on it, but I just definitely want to hold space for them.
Sure. Yeah. Any member of that subcommittee?
Hi, Rob, I can jump in just briefly.
Sure.
as I communicated, I think in the last meeting and to some of you via email, the experience with the education subcommittee has been a little frustrating in that, it seems that the school committee and Andrew and Lori are reluctant to engage in a DEI subcommittee meeting that would be open to the public. So they've steered us to the DEI subcommittee of the school committee, as you all saw in our last meeting. And I did attend that meeting, and I sent an email sort of summarizing, our experience of that meeting, which was really just listening to Andrew's presentation. So it has been a challenge to actually, to date, we have not actually been able to get a subcommittee, a public open meeting scheduled with this education subcommittee and a member of the school or school committee. So that's where we are right now. And to be honest, I think the school committee and the DEI subcommittee of the school committee have their hands full with the Metco coalition and dealing with, some delicate situations there. And I think, Rose, I propose that we turn it over to you and presenting that Metco situation, because I think that as a committee, we can sort of get our bearing on how we're going to respond to situations like that. And I think that's actually going to be, in the short term, more meaningful than trying to wrangle people to engage with yet another, DEI committee.
So I don't know if you all are aware, but as of last night, the DEI subcommittee has been dissolved as part of the school committee. So there is no longer a DEI subcommittee.
So I wasn't aware of that.
Mm.
Rose, are you talking about the school side? School DEI?
The
Okay.
DEI subcommittee as part of the school committee has been dissolved as of last night.
Okay.
Do you have any information on why and who led that effort?
Well, I mean, Matt and I were both present for that meeting, and I know, Matt, you have your hand up as well, so I'll allow you to chime in here. So please.
Well, and even more so, Cynthia Rainey was there as a member of the school committee and is the liaison to this committee. So she may prefer to speak, and I would defer to her. But yeah, there were quite a few developments last night.
Yes, there were.
On this
as there are every day, Matt.
But I mean, just saying as an outsider, again, I don't have a inside view. It did seem like in other respects last night was progress, in that first of all, there was a first meeting of this steering committee that is cross-functional. It's got teachers and students and parents and of course school committee members on it, 23 members. It is toward the end of the school year, however, and it does seem to me that it's going to have to kind of restart in the fall. But there is also a draft plan, and it's a 5-year strategic plan, and with a first year set of goals that it's only draft at this stage, but there's something. And then while the subcommittee was dissolved, and there was debate about that, and it was the vote was, I think, 3-2 to 1 abstention. The idea by the proponents, it seemed, was that the steering committee would take on the work, and that the school committee itself.
Campus prescription for Cal Richmond.
So, that because it's such a strategic issue.
They just called it over from the other CVS.
You're not on mute. You're not on mute. So that the school committee would try, instead of doing the work in the subcommittee, they were suggesting they would take this on at the committee level. And then finally, with the respect to the DEI, the Metco parents' request for board seats, there was progress there in that instead of 1 seat, there's now a proposal of 2 seats. They're still non-voting because of the charter and other legal issues. But then there's a private stipend that's been offered from, I guess, from Metco Inc. So for travel. So in other words, some of the demands have been met, not all of them, however. So there's still, I think, a shortfall in terms of maybe attending executive sessions and some of the other points. So what I would say, though, is just last night, there was a very big DEI focus of the school committee meeting, and there was progress on a few fronts.
How I do want to raise up that, and Cynthia, thank you for being here. And, you know, for many of us who attended and heard your request for a public commitment on following through on behalf of the Metco Collective for a commitment towards going, you know, advancing that journey of seeking out ways to ensure that that seat would actually hold voting power. And I think it's, you know, that commitment, I didn't hear that in the meeting. I saw that question posed several times, and that didn't happen. And so while there was a draft, an additional draft proposed at the meeting yesterday, there are still several, I would say, concerns as it relates to what the Metco Collective is seeking as part of the draft language, and to be viewed and respected as a governing body as part of this effort. So the final language, and, you know, not to rehash everything, but the final language, yes, they did offer 2 seats, but the final language states that, as in its current draft state, appears to state currently that if there is a vacancy or if a nomination needs to be put forward, it would be put forward through the superintendent's advisory group that she has comprised of a selection of people. The Metco Collective is seeking that they will be the governing body to hold elections and to put forth nominations and to obviously address any vacancies that occur. That's still a pending matter, in addition to several other matters as it relates to professional development training for all staff to happen within 1 year as opposed to 5, outstanding civil rights violations, and issues concerning children in the school system, which remains also outstanding. There was a public commitment by Superintendent Hunter at a meeting that I was actually at that meeting in Boston in April, where she stated she would abolish the N-word the next day throughout the school system. They have concerns about the fact that that has not happened. While I think there are, it sounds like there's efforts towards figuring out how to address that. The Metco Collective is seeking a response. So there's a lot of concerns around timeline and responsiveness as it relates to the concerns, I would say the collective concerns of Metco families. And the lack of timely responsiveness or feeling like things are there's a lot of barriers to being able to get information and to get a response and to be able to engage, and doing so in a way that's convenient for Metco families.
Thank you for this, Rose. And I just want to pause for just half a second to welcome and acknowledge the newest member of our commission, Kristen Haggerty. Kristen, thank you so much for agreeing to join us on this commission. You've had some great experience in doing this work as an individual, but also as you work on the planning board has been really great. So we're really excited to have you here with us. So
All set. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I apologize that I'm late, but it's nice. I'm trying to reach out to people individually so I can say hi and introduce myself so that I don't have to take up too much time, explaining who I am, because I'm kind of coming in not only late to this meeting, but right after you guys have kind of started. So can I say just one quick thing? Mm-hmm. I just wanted to let people know I had just finished last night my 5-year term on the planning board, and that was the first town committee that I was part of in Concord, and it really took kind of all 5 years to figure out what was going on. So I hope that that what I learned kind of as part of that municipal process, and the access to the staff I had, and how we worked with town staff, we had a lot of support. Certainly, it sounds like significantly more than what this commission has. But just in terms of helping to plan meetings and agendas and goals. So I'm happy to kind of give you my select experience for that 5 years. But I'm really excited to kind of jump in. And so please, if I'm too enthusiastic, just you can help me rein myself in.
Yeah. Well, we're excited for your enthusiasm and your experience. So thank you. We are in the beginnings of a conversation around the MECO committee that has been very active of late, and Rose was giving us a really good synopsis of some of the more recent meetings that I've had, including the one last night. Cynthia, I'm not sure if you're there or not, but it would be very informative to hear your perspective as a school board member and someone who was at these meetings. If you're there, I'm not sure if you're actually there. Okay, well, we'll wait on that. But I also, one of the things I would like to discuss as a group here is, obviously there's much work happening on the ground level with a number of different stakeholders, and I think what would be important for us as a commission is to decide as a body what is our relationship to this very important matter in the town. What is our response to everything that's going on? And as a newer commission, as a newer body, I think we have the opportunity to shape that in the most appropriate and powerful way. And so I'd love to open it up for others to hear what we think may be a good way to not only address this matter, but as other things come up, and they will, what is our strategy? What's our process to address these really important issues? And in a way, this is our first case study, so we get to build it as we go.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Hi, I'm in the car, and so I don't know. I don't see where I can raise my hand, so I hope it's okay that I'm just jumping in. But one of my feelings on this situation, I know there is, there are members of the committee who really want to back and amplify the voices of the METCO collective. And I think that between that range and where, my instinct to fall would be to be more of a liaison towards the goal of more equity. But I think, in my view, CORE already exists in town. The METCO collective already exists in town. I feel like our role as a DEI commission can be to help facilitate conversations towards the goal of equity. But I don't know, in my view, I feel like it's a duplication of effort if we basically operate, as an organization like CORE that's very, focused on its mission. I think I'd like to see, when I joined the DEI commission, I envisioned my role more as being a liaison, trying to find some common ground, because I see progress in this town and, probably all over the world being made incrementally, and it's just nudging steps towards justice and equity. So I think, with that said, I think there's certainly space for each of us commission members to act as private citizens. But I think it's important to preserve the DEI commission as a group that the school committee can trust, as as a group that's working in the best interest of, both the school committee and different DEI collectives and DEI initiatives around town, rather than seeing the DEI Commission as just another adversary.
Thank you, Ha.
Does that make sense? Is that clear?
I think so, yes. No, I appreciate that framing, Ha. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm happy to jump in if you don't mind me just, first meeting and just
Jump in.
talking. I think one of the challenges, and for the record, personally, it's been pretty frustrating watching Boston families kind of systematically bring their concerns, collectively working together, presenting what we hope are kind of realistic proposals, and really not being supported by the community, the school community, and by that I mean other parents. That part's been really hard to watch, and it's been hard not to personally be able to help amplify the voices as much as I'd like. So let me just kind of say that personal part. So I would like to beat the drum as much as we can, and really say, hey, what's going on? Does everybody see what's going on here? That being said, I think one of the challenges in terms of being able to have a large group of people on this commission be able to collectively move together is, it sounds like the charge of the commission is not as clear as it could be, and that's kind of part of what we're going to do is define that. And so it's a little hard to be able to even come to a decision about what we should and should not do. And Rose, I know this is obviously near and dear to your heart, and I support you, and I support the Boston families, and I support the fact that you want to get as much support behind the Boston families as we can, and I agree with that. And I don't necessarily think that by having this commission weigh in and saying, this is an example of where we want to bring, make sure equity is happening, and this is what equity would look like, or something like that. Perhaps there's some middle ground where the commission can weigh in with what Ha was saying, in a way that it will certainly come across in support of families that are petitioning for equity.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, Rose, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I just want to lift up and I really just bring us back to the responsibilities, the duties and responsibilities under our current charge, which state provide observations and identify areas of systemic racism in Concord, develop recommendations of steps to be taken as individuals, organizations, and as a community to combat racism and embrace greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in Concord, work in conjunction and in cooperation with community, government, cultural, and faith groups that are addressing DEI issues to optimize the availability and use of resources, suggest townwide events or activities that foster cultural awareness and increase minority representation on government boards and committees, and it goes on and on. So I can go on to gather firsthand experiences in Concord from historically disenfranchised and underrepresented populations, including racial, ethnic, religious, etc. Facilitate discussions and education forums for Concord residents and employers about the issues around DEI. Develop strategies and tools to assess the racial climate, which is kind of ties into the climate survey, but also seek out fact-gathering means and to measure progress. So identify ways to promote awareness, engagement, and community building around diverse experiences and to create a more inclusive, welcoming community. I find this to be directly in alignment with our charge and our roles and responsibilities. I think comparing the commission to CORE, which is widely known as a predominantly homogenous group of parents, committed caregivers in this community, and the comparison to the Metco Collective, they're all distinctly different. And I think that there's nothing barring us to be able to come together in collaboration to help address various facets of what is impacting our community. But to say that it's not within our scope, I disagree with. I think it is our responsibility as a commission to respond. Because it's directly aligned with our duties and responsibilities as outlined in the charge.
Yeah, Andrea, yes, please.
Rose, do you have a proposal of how we should address it? I'm just trying to visualize how institutional should our response be, or if it should be, completely, direct. Are you thinking of something specific? I'd like to know what you're thinking and see if we can maybe, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So, thank you, Andrea, for posing that question. I mean, so if we look at directly what is on the table before school committee right now, they are looking at the draft of the proposed language as it relates to the METCO representatives who will sit on school committee. The METCO collective is seeking to be seen.
Right.
They're seeking acknowledgement that they exist as a collective. That is not happening right now. The fact that they cannot be included in the draft language and still not being included, and instead being asked to become a PTG or become another entity when by virtue of their existence, they are the Boston PTG.
Right.
They are, and so by telling them to become something else when they already exist is questioning their legitimacy. So I think at the very least, the DEI Commission can submit a letter in support of what they're advocating to be seen and acknowledged. And at the bare minimum, I think that's the least we could do at this stage. And this has been going on for months.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. Please.
So, but I think, again, the question specifically is, and Rose, I want to be clear, like I am for the equity and justice for the METCO families. I think that the school response to the Black Students Union meeting in the fall was completely inadequate. And I think, I know the students felt betrayed by that. But when they put out that proposal, if we were to write a letter to say, we support the METCO collective and, we want them to be seen, I think that then you get into what are the steps that would satisfy that feeling of being seen? And then you're back to the demands from the METCO collective. And can we as a commission support all of those demands? And I, quite honestly, having been in the town for 20 years and being frustrated by the response to my own children of color in the schools, I don't see all of those demands being met. And so unless we can help mediate and find, all right, what are some of the pieces that will help the METCO families feel seen and that the school committee can realistically take action on in the near term, unless we can be trusted by both sides to be that mediating voice, I think, we're just another group beating the drum on the METCO collective side. And I think that the superintendent, the administration, and perhaps the school committee as well, they're a little bit, they haven't been responsive. So I don't think that another group beating the same drum is going to be able to find that movement. That's my personal opinion. And I think some of the language directed towards the administration and the school committee is a little more abrasive than they can take.
Quiet, please.
And I think that, it's not that I disagree that people are frustrated. It's not that I disagree that people should have voices. It's, I've been, as a parent and as a private citizen, extremely frustrated myself, but I've also been careful to temper my language when dealing with my own family's issues with the schools, because I want to keep that line of communication open and I want a response. And I don't want them to see me and my family and my children as, a group that they can't work with.
Okay.
So I guess my question to you again is, if we can identify as a commission, we support the Metco Collective, and these are the steps that we think are actionable, and we support, in the short term. I think, just in my personal opinion, that is going to be more helpful than just a blanket statement of we support them and we beat the drum.
Mhm. Thank you for that, Ha. I know that there are quite a few folks who do want to speak, and although we usually save public comments to the end, this is a conversation that I think we can facilitate between this commission and the public as well, and it'd be good to get people's thoughts. I want to go to Andrea and then Tanya. We can hear from you after that, please.
Thank you, Robert. Ha, my question would be the same. Do you visualize a specific answer?
Is this a question for me or for Rose?
For you.
Oh, for me. Do I envision a specific answer?
Yes, I asked Rose.
Yes.
I want to know if you propose any type of answer, nothing at all.
Yes. So for instance, and
Yeah.
I don't have the list of demands in front of me, but I can imagine that our response would be to amplify the need for greater equity and justice for these families, to be seen, to be heard, to have I think the demand to have the administration reply to their grievances within a timely time frame is exceedingly reasonable. I know in some cases even that hasn't been done. So I think that is one of the reasonable demands on the list. I think, and I'm a little behind on this, so it may have shifted, but I know at some point the demand was 1 voting seat and at one point perhaps 2 seats. And I think, I would stop, frankly, short of that, because when the town as a whole looks at the population of the school, it's disproportionate. And whether or not that in the end might be a useful thing, and maybe, perhaps in the end, that might be something that makes sense. But I think where we are today, I don't think the school or the community is ready to approve 2 voting seats on a school board where, those seats would be disproportionately weighted towards, a very specific population. So I would go through the list. I would think the responses, would be a reasonable thing to get behind. I also think equity training for teachers within 1 year versus 5 years. Absolutely. I think that's doable and reasonable. But, I think we need to give them things that they can do to start on that journey, as opposed to showing up at every meeting and just saying our kids aren't being heard, our kids aren't being heard. Because we've said that. I mean, I've said that as a parent.
That's okay, Andrea, please.
A follow-up question real quick. Would this be a letter too?
I think I was responding to what Rose had proposed as a letter from the DEI Commission to the school committee, if that's the path she wants to take, or if that's the path she proposes.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ha. Tanya, your hand's up, and we'd love to hear your thoughts, please.
Thank you so much, Rob. As I mentioned in a note to you guys, I look white here and everything, but where I come from, I am a silenced minority. So I know about the frustrations of inclusion and speaking out. I think Ha's comments are very intelligent and felt, and I can sense her own experience and how it is affecting her thoughts and approach. But in principle, I agree with Rosa's approach for the reason that the basis of DEI is not that there is the school committee and then there are DEI groups. The whole basis is that there shouldn't even be a need for DEI. The whole basis is that we are all one community. We are all human beings. So if some of us are not want to express, Metco families want to express their wishes as active participants in the Concord school system, it should not be seen as the school committee versus Metco. And for that reason, I understand how you must have suffered a lot as an individual trying to defend your family against ignorant system, let's say, if not intentionally racist. But so if there is a way to fully support the Metco demands, but not necessarily, if some people are finding the language abrasive, without using this, perhaps using less abrasive sounding language, but without compromising on the demands and the statements and the observation that this is not one group versus another, this is one big school community. And thank you very much for taking my comment.
Thank you, Tanya. Really appreciate it. Anyone else have additional thoughts they'd like to add on to this conversation? Okay. So I think the task ahead of us this evening, right? I think there is a desire from folks in this commission to find a way to appropriately respond to what is going on in the town. And I think that's a good target for us. I think what we need to hash out over the next little time is, what does that look like? And I think Rose was appropriate to bring up the charge. Our response from this commission is well within the parameters of our charge, right? And in that way, it's our prerogative to respond. And I think as part of the goals of this commission is to, like Ha said, both facilitate difficult conversation, but also to suggest, recommend, and take action where appropriate. And I think we can do both of those things at this time. We have had, as individuals, a number of conversations with different stakeholders who are involved in this situation. And even this evening, as the commission, we've dedicated the last 40 minutes to having this conversation and hearing multiple sides and perspectives. And so what I would like to do now, and this is where this conversation perhaps gets a little bit more difficult, is figure out as a commission how we want to respond, to whom we may want to respond, recognizing that this is really our first public response to a matter. It may not be the best, it may not be the one that sticks, it may be dynamic and change over time, and we may have a number of responses as we get responses back and forth. So the call and response nature of this could be pretty dynamic. But I think leaving this meeting with a very strong motion to make a response, I think, is something I would really like to do before we sign off here this evening. And so with that, I'm curious if we can come together and think of, I guess, the tone and tenor of what that response might look like. That would be, to me, a good next step.
I think that's a great actionable item. I feel like when I listen to the school committee meetings, part of what is lacking that this response might be able to address is just the fundamental not understanding what diversity, equity, and inclusion are or look like in this context. And so, the school committee members keep saying DEI, keep talking about the different DEI groups, but then when they have an opportunity to include voices in the conversation and be inclusive, their actions are not matching the words. So I wonder if this commission can, you know, provide some education in terms of like, hey, this was so important that a commission was formed in Concord, in the town. And, you know, as part of our charge, we want to help other committees and boards, you know, recognize when they could be doing a better job at this. And this is an example. Like, is that one way that we could come at this? Because I just don't think they realize, and let me give you another example. Some Boston families, and Rose, you might have already said this, but some Boston families, you know, brought up some issues, particularly to do with a stipend, and they felt like they were laughed at in response, right? And I'm sure the school committee members did not intend to, most certainly did not intend to offend anyone, but they didn't realize it. And so I wonder if there's a way we can kind of call out what inclusion would mean in cases like this, when you're trying to, you know, enlarge the community and make people feel heard, and what equity means, because again, you know, it's not equal and things like that. So that's one suggestion that might help create awareness on the school committee, who is trying to do the best they can, but maybe could do better.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense, Kristen. I appreciate that. Thank you. Please.
I just wanted to say, Kristen, I think your language is perfect, because I think that the tone of what I'm hearing from you is to give the school committee the benefit of the doubt that perhaps they don't see. You know, I think everyone wants to imagine that they are doing their best. I think everyone wants to imagine that they are empathetic towards the different groups. So I really like your language and your framing of it, because I think that to me is what I had in mind when I think of being a liaison and helping to further the conversation. So I think that's much more helpful than, you know, me as a person of color on the DEI committee coming forward and saying, you know, you're not hearing people of color.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Rose, please.
So a couple of things in terms of, you know, I think the issue that you just raised, Kristen, is one that it really is an example around the concerns over professional development training, not just for staff, but also for the school committee. And the words equity and equality are not interchangeable. They don't mean the same thing. And I think that's what we're hearing and seeing consistently over and over again. And I think that's why there was concerns over yesterday from the community and even members of committee who are even on this call as to the, you know, why are we dissolving a DEI subcommittee when there still should be some checkpoints in place around ongoing training for school committee and other pieces. I hear you, and I also share your concerns as a private citizen and a parent and a woman of color in this town. And so I just want to acknowledge that, because I totally understand individually, but as a commission, I feel like the whole purpose of our commission, the whole you know, purpose in us activating as a commission and elevating our voice. Right now, we don't have a voice. Right now, there is no active engagement with community on this matter, or really any matter. And so how can we activate as a commission in a meaningful way that's tenored, is respectful, but clear? You know, I think that, you know, people being ignored because of their race is an issue. People being laughed at when a matter is proposed is a concern. And we first need to feel safe enough as a community to elevate our concerns. And then once folks have the courage to be faced with issues like this, you know, I think that that's our whole purpose as a commission, is to help be able to lean in and to call in, quite frankly, matters like this in a way that would be deliberate, intentional, and hopefully have a, you know, a better turnaround in terms of responsiveness.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. G, yes, please.
Hi, Rob and commission members. I've been quietly listening tonight because recently I haven't been able to join some of those meetings you have been sharing. I'm so glad I'm catching up in this space. So I hear a lot of compassionate individuals and all want to bring inclusion and diversity to our town. So I just want to share a little bit different perspective. And recently I had opportunity to work with Concord Public School DEI Commission, Andrew Nimachi, and put together an event called a Race Amity Day celebration, because the philosophy Race Amity attract to my heart, and I feel that's something I'm passionate about. And me and a couple of like-minded friends have been working quietly in town on this special day that's the Governor Charlie Baker declared in 2015 is a special day for the whole state of in the Commonwealth. And it's a day to join hands, celebrate our diversity in our neighborhood, in our community. So when me and another friend shared this idea with Andrew, he embraced it wholeheartedly. And now it's gonna be a school-wide, town-wide event. So I wonder, first of all, I want to invite all of you on this Zoom to participate as an individual. And because if we don't get to know each other, how can we work together? I feel like this is such a new commission. I'm still finding opportunities to get to know each one of you. And I think Matt and the select board is very purposeful, select 9 of us. We're like 9 very different sides of this prison. Each of us shine a different light. So, but first of all, through meeting, of course, we have opportunity to acknowledge, but I'm like to encourage you to find other opportunities to build service together. And then I think then our commission will be able to operate at a much higher level if we get to know each other better. So first of all, I just invite you to join this Race Amity celebration as an individual. And on the other hand, collectively, we can think about it. This Race Amity is very much in line with our DEI commission. What can we do as a commission to support events like this in town? And what are kind of things we can bridge Mecco family and the Concord family through opportunities like this? Andrew invited all the Mecco family plus the host family. So we're expecting a beautiful turnout. So what kind of things we can do on that day? What kind of activity we can have to engage conversation, to break down barriers, to make us get to know another race, another culture through this one-day event. Of course, this is just a very step towards a much longer journey. But I think that's something I feel like I can contribute to just by being there and finding ways to get to know people. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, G. It's important always to underscore the relational element of all of this work, right? That it's taken us 5 months to get to know one another, we can do this work together, and we're still getting to know one another and the various perspectives we have. And I think that's true in this situation with the Metco Coalition and the school board as well. And so I want to affirm that, G, and I think that's certainly part of the work that we can do as liaisons throughout town. I think that's really important. At the risk of being reductionist, I want to thank everyone for their thoughts, and I want to hazard a proposal. And again, I'm going to throw this out there for people to slam down and yell and throw virtual cabbage and tomatoes at me, but I want to see if I can find a way to honor what Ha is saying, and I think there's some very good validity there, and to honor the urgency and the emergence that Rose is affirming as well. And so I think as a commission, as I look back at the charge, we are charged with being an entity in town that can define DEI for town entities to support not only the definitions that we need to see, but how those definitions are applied in certain instances. For example, I think that there seems to be a very clear miscommunication between the METCO coalition and the families they represent and the school board, right? And it seems as though people throughout town believe they're doing X in the name of equity, but really that's not resonating with other stakeholders. And so I think as we recognize that language is such an important element of this, what if we as a commission, and again, this is the first part of our charge, we have defined diversity, equity, inclusion in the first part of our charge. If we're able to offer those definitions and then offer how those definitions can be applied in this moment or in each moment, if we're just using this as a case study, then will that help set parameters and allow us to be kind of checks and balances for all stakeholders who are doing this work, right? So in this letter that we would be drafting to the school board, in a letter that would also then go out to the METCO coalition and other people, can we serve as that mediating force to define what we believe is the work that needs to happen, and then to help enforce that language. And so when we believe the school board is not acting in doing this work, we can say, hey, this is the definition that you guys and we all believe we're doing. It's not happening. Now we can then be a little bit more active there, right? I wonder if something like that might allow us to preserve the liaison element that we're looking for. It allows for what G is saying around building these relationships and supporting people to learn some of these definitions and to act on it. And to Rose's point, it allows us to be very concrete with the scope of what we can do as a commission and allow us to enforce that in a pretty real way with people. That's my proposal. It may be terrible, but I'm throwing it out there to see what people think. Yes, please.
I think that sounds totally reasonable. And I think that's a meaningful role for the commission.
Mm-hmm. Rose, I'm curious. I know I'm springing this on people, and I was trying to also channel Kristen, who I think brought up nomenclature and definitions as an integral part of this process. I also want to affirm the fact that we as a commission have not responded, and this has been work this has been happening over the period of months and years. And so I do know that time is of the essence, and I want to make sure that our response correlates to the amount of pain and conversation that has already occurred. And so I'd love to hear what you think about that, Rose.
I'd like to submit a motion to issue a response collectively. So we can, activate that and get moving on that. Yes.
Okay. We got a motion, which is a beautiful thing. Love me a good motion. And so the motion is to, as a commission, develop a formal response. And actually, Rose, maybe you can give me the language here, please.
Yeah, so a motion to file a formal response on behalf, as a DEI commission in response to the matter pending before school committee surrounding METCO families. Because we have.
Yeah. Can we get a second?
Actually, I had a question. So Rob, you had proposed, a path, kind of a flavor for that response. And I guess I'd love to hear, Rose, your feelings on Rob's proposal because I think we're all in agreement that a response is due, but I think to vote on a response before we can agree on the flavor feels a little premature.
I feel the same as Ha. I think we all have the same vision, and but each one of us may have a different little angle. So I love what Rob summarized. And I wonder if we have the time to put something more concrete than just Rob's summary. But I prefer something more concrete before I make a decision.
Okay, Rose.
Outlining our commitment as a DEI commission, as it states in our charge, as it relates to the pending matters, I think is totally relevant. And that's definitely what I would be seeking as part of this.
So I agree with what folks have said, and I don't find these two things mutually exclusive. I think we can still pass the motion and then dedicate time, right? We make that commitment to responding, and then that will allow us the time to move forward and formalizing what that response would look like and coming up with those details. Kristen, please.
Just from my experience on the planning board, you know, often what we do, if we made a recommendation to another committee or something formal in writing, we are able to, you know, see a draft of it before the full motion, but you know, there has to be some forward momentum in order for somebody to draft it, or you know, for somebody to collect responses from individuals and then draft it. But then we could do the motion to actually about the actual item itself.
Okay.
I don't know if it works the same way here, but it was certainly a way to be able to and see the draft and then kind of make some amendments, and then you say, you know, I move to, you know, send this as amended or something like that.
Yep. I appreciate that. Thank you, Kristen. Great. So yeah, Matt, please.
Just a couple of points of process. So first is there's a motion on the table. Typically you would have someone second it, and then people would raise their concerns. You'd have discussion, you know, basically without a second, there's no proposition to, you know, discuss. So that's the first thing. And then second is I absolutely agree with Kristen's description that a typical process is that you might have a motion where you assign someone to draft a letter, and then at the subsequent meeting, you review the letter and decide whether to send it, you know, as amended or if amendments were required. So by the way, I just think the whole discussion and debate's been wonderful in this meeting. It's going well. I hate to step in with parliamentary procedure, but I thought I should mention those things.
No, I appreciate that, Matt. And one of the things that I wanted to solidify, I think, at this meeting, because I know that, right, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 6 of us on the committee here who have likely 4 to 6 different perspectives and opinions on how to move forward. I wanted to, and probably this is overkill, I wanted to solidify in the minutes itself the idea that we as a commission have agreed to move forward with a formal response, and then would, you know, assign somebody to draft that response, and we would vote in the subsequent meeting on the, you know, the actual response itself. But I think the idea that we've been chatting for an hour, and I think now we've gotten to the point where we as a body have agreed to make a response is not insignificant. And especially given the youthfulness of our commission, I think, and the fact that this is our first major response, I wanted that on record. But I think, to your point, Matt, thank you. I never hate when you jump in with parliamentary procedure, because I think that's important for us. And so I appreciate that fact. So I want to try this again. Because we did not get a second, so it was kind of dead on arrival. So I want to ask Rose, would you mind offering your motion again, please?
Motion to submit a formal response by the DEI Commission on behalf of Metco families to school committee. preliminarily drafted by our clerk, Andrea Fonserrada.
Okay, can I get a second, please? Thank you. Seconds. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call each person out for their vote, please. So I'll start with G.
Yes, second.
Approve. Good. G approves. Ha.
Approved.
Thank you. Kristen.
Yes.
Thank you. Andrea.
Yes.
Thank you. And Rose.
Yes.
I also approve. So that motion is passed. So thank you guys for that first part there, and thank you, Andrea, for agreeing to draft that that document. I think that's going to be really important for us, and you know, really glad that that draft is in your hands. So thank you so much. All right. Before we move on to other items on the agenda, I don't want to close this topic prematurely and want to make sure that folks here, both of the public and of the commission, have had the opportunity to weigh in and share all of their thoughts. Erin, yes, please.
Hi, everyone. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much for taking the time and effort to have this conversation. I think as a member of the public, I missed the first half of the first 30 minutes of your conversation, but I really appreciate that you're putting thought into it. I do think that the commission, as a member of the public, my view on the commission is that it is there as a guide, that you all with your collective voices can be that guiding principle. And I think focusing on the definitions and encouraging other organizations in town when they don't know what they don't know, when they don't understand the impact of some of the things that they're doing, I think is incredibly valuable and important. And I know there are a lot of organizations in town who will, I hope, look to you for that kind of guidance. And so I really appreciate that you are going to be stepping up and having a response, and that's what it's going to be. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate that. Any thoughts from anybody else before we move on to another agenda item? Okay, great. Well, I'm sorry. I need to pull up my agenda quickly. I apologize. Here we are. Because we've jumped around, I do, and I apologize for that. I do want to ask Ha if you could give just an update, Ha, on the Climate Justice Nexus.
Sure. I attended the meeting with the U.S. I'm going to get the acronym wrong without it in front of me, but with the Nexus group, there was Peyton and a woman named Baha, and we met with Amanda Cohn, who is the Director of Sustainability for the town of Concord. It seemed to be not the right fit for us at this time. I think that, it's a very new program, and they were proposing equity training for all of us as, as a first step. And they were not able or willing to give us a sense of what the objective was in the end, and whether there was a grant that was available, for a project. So without specifics, I think the town wasn't willing to commit the people and time at this point until we see some track record of what this group has done or proposes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at the time, our response to that Nexus group is that it's not the right time for us in Concord.
Okay. Good. Thank you for that, Ha.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions about that? Howard did a great job, being an ambassador for our commission with that. And I think down the road, that might be some good collaboration there, but not right now. Great. I might leave it to you. I do want to jump quickly to committee reports, if that's okay. if you don't mind giving a little bit of an update on the education subcommittee, please.
Sure. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the education subcommittee, it was a challenge to get anything off the ground because, as I said, different school personnel and groups, frankly, didn't seem to have the bandwidth or the desire to engage in an open meeting with us. So they directed us to the subcommittee, which is now the DEI subcommittee, which is now disbanded. So now that that subcommittee is disbanded, maybe it's time to sort of, try to re-engage and see if they're willing to meet. But I know we weren't getting a lot of traction and responses from the people we reached out to. Mm-hmm. And that includes administration and Andrew, who said, as far as an open meeting goes, he directed us to the school subcommittee as opposed to wanting to be a part of that meeting himself.
As a subcommittee, do we feel that we can be effective? And obviously we're drafting this letter and hopefully that gives us some teeth, but how effective can we be if we're not getting meetings with the people with whom we need to meet? And I wonder how we can kind of activate that change. Right. Erin, yes, please. Yep.
Thanks. Just a note, at the school committee meeting last night, they appointed an observer to the DEI commission from the school committee. So I believe I see that Cynthia is on tonight. I can't remember who was appointed, but it might be Cynthia. I'm not sure. But that seems like the school committee is interested in partnering, at least to sort of share information and stuff. So I'm not sure how all that works, but just as a heads up that happened yesterday.
Yep.
Awesome.
Can you hear me? It's Cynthia Rainey.
Yes, Cynthia, thank you.
So yeah, I am taking notes and I am definitely going to forward this information to the school committee. And I appreciate the conversation very much. Will the meeting be posted to MMN?
I believe that's the hope, yes, after
great
recording.
Good. So, but I'm sending notes as they come up to our chairs so they know what's going on. So really appreciate the conversation.
Okay, thank you for being here, Cynthia. We appreciate it. Rose, may I turn it over to you to talk about the climate survey?
Yes, so I know I went through this rather thoroughly last time in our meeting, but for the purposes of time, I just want to be mindful of our proposed current draft climate survey that we're seeking to distribute town-wide. And this is just a draft. It kind of states our introduction as a commission, our definitions as it stands to DEI, and a series of questions beginning with community role, years of residency in Concord, age, race, ethnic origins, which we went through, and I've integrated feedback from the commission last time, religious affiliation, if any, gender identity, sexual orientation. In a typical year, how often folks self-identify that they interact with people who are culturally different from them, how comfortable are they in discussing matters of race. And we discussed, making this more of into a scaled version of 1 through 5, which we can modify in its final version. Individual comfort level as it relates to discussing matters of race and racial issues outside of family. How well the town does in creating a welcoming environment to all members of the community, a sense of belonging, and measuring that in the town of Concord. I feel respected by members of the Concord community, a number of people that I've gotten to know as friends I've made in Concord have very different opinions and beliefs from mine. So, and then going on to assess, friends and interacting with individuals who have different backgrounds than mine as it relates to country of origin, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and so forth. The town of Concord uses appropriate and inclusive language and communications with the community. The Concord community members are treated fairly regardless of individual differences, race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, and disability. People are treated fairly, unfairly during interactions with the following Concord Public Services, and we've listed an array of services ranging from town management to the Recreation Department, school system, Concord Police Department, Department of Health, and they can identify if they've experienced anything themselves, observed themselves, or it doesn't apply or no. And it goes on to assess further interactions with the Concord Library, transfer station, medical facilities, childcare and enrichment services, restaurants, stores, personal services, professional services, banks, other businesses. I feel that I can fully express myself, the following aspects of my identity in Concord, selecting all that apply. How welcome we are as a community are to business owners, for especially those who seek to start new businesses in Concord. Also rating one's perception of the ease of starting a business in Concord. Did one feel welcome starting their own business? And this would be a drop-down customized only if they answered yes to that initial question. Otherwise, it would forego to the next section. Have you experienced or witnessed any of the following in Concord? And it has a list of various negative experiences. If you faced unfair treatment based on your identity, who did you go to? Like, who are people activating or engaging with as safe avenues for them to seek help in the community, the police, faculty or administration, social media, town management, other avenues, or did not have an avenue, or not applicable as they did not face any unfair treatment as it relates to their identity. If you were to face or witness unfair treatment based on your identity, to whom would you go? And again, it identifies safe avenues that people would either engage or choose that they don't have an avenue to engage. And then further going on to ask, I feel I can raise issues about unfair treatment without fear of consequences, yes or no. And I just want to elevate, I'll go through this completely, but do you feel the town and town management and services respond appropriately and with integrity to incidents of racism? Yes, no, or if no, please specify. What should the town of Concord do to further efforts for DEI in order of priority? And so it has a range from A through J. And then the last one, please use this space below to provide any additional feedback or suggestions for the Town of Concord DEI Commission, and particularly as it relates to guiding and kind of developing a timeline and strategic focus for our efforts as a commission. I would really love to begin gathering information from the community, beginning with our website and seeking out ways that the community can engage with us by way of the website and knowing how to reach each of us, in addition to conducting a town-wide survey where residents and individuals can engage in the survey anonymously, because we do recognize and want to acknowledge that there's a real fear of retaliation when speaking one's truth as it relates to sensitive matters such as this. That is very real. So having a safe space where people can respond truthfully and anonymously, I think, is really important. This has been shared with the entire commission for feedback, and it'll be attached to our meeting minutes as well.
So, thank you, Rose. I appreciate that. In terms of these subcommittees in process, I'd like to propose the following. I think I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I want to make sure that this commission can sustain its momentum and have our next meeting pretty closely on the heels of this meeting. But I also want to make time for the subcommittees to meet to do some of the important work. So to the climate subcommittee, Rose, I think it would be important to get together to finalize the language of the survey, to then work with the town on the process of getting that survey out and ensuring the responses. And that would likely mean that we would need some staff support to do that. But I think getting that subcommittee together pretty soon seems imperative to me. I think to your subcommittee of the education subcommittee, Cynthia here is that liaison for the school board. I think, once Cynthia is able to get some of this information to her colleagues, I think it would be very important to sit down as a commission with Cynthia and other folks to talk through what our letter will talk about in our role as a commission relative to that school board. And so I think obviously the timing is difficult with the end of the school year, but to the extent that we can get both of these subcommittees to meet in the next couple of weeks to progress this work, I think that would be really helpful. And then we can come back as a full committee to have a more generative conversation with some really clear steps to move forward. And that also gives Andrea time to develop and circulate or develop a draft that we can then look through as well. Does that make sense to folks? Sorry.
Sounds good, Rob.
Okay. I want to, Matt turned his screen on again, which means usually I screwed up parliamentary procedure.
No, I was just going to just note to people, and I think as Tanya Galis had pointed out, that, if you are going to have a subcommittee meeting, you need to notice it and held it as a public meeting. It can be over Zoom or whatever, but if it's in person, you have to say where it is and give a time certain. And there's an email address, I think it's called meetings@concord.ma.gov, where you can send your, info so that it does get posted by the town clerk, or you can just contact the town clerk's office. They manage the postings. Yeah. So those are key things to make sure you're taken care of. Thanks.
No, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. I do want to I want to move ahead a little bit on the agenda to Concord's Coalition to Build Community, which we have talked about as a commission before. As a refresher, this is a coalition of organizations and individuals in town who are committed to advancing DEI work. This was started in the fall in response to Nicole Hannah-Jones's disinvitation to Middlesex School, and really developed grassroots through some work with area schools and area organizations to most immediately figure out how to respond to that, but also how to work with now this commission to spread the word, or the gospel, as it were, of this commission throughout the different organizations in town. A few months ago, Aaron Fife agreed to chair that coalition, and they had what appears to be a really generative meeting a few weeks ago. And in a lot of ways, that coalition is waiting to hear from us around next steps and ways that they can be helpful to forward our work. And so I'm in touch with Aaron and other members of that coalition to share what we're doing and where they can help us. But I think as commission members, as we do this work and recognize that right now there's 6 of us, but ideally 9 of us, and we're all really overwhelmed and maxed out in a lot of ways, to know that we have this sister organization that's working really to support the work that we're doing, and has representatives from a lot of the town's organizations and faith-based groups that can help us get to their congregants and their people to spread this work. So I wanted to share that here. And Aaron, I'm not sure if there is more information from the last meeting that would be germane for this conversation, but if there is, you can feel free to let us know at some point in this meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. That was a good summary. We're trying to meet quarterly. So we actually met at the end of March, and our next meeting is coming up in a couple of weeks in June. And one of the things I've been thinking about, just to throw it out there, is the idea of Lincoln did a training where they had representatives from pretty much like every committee in town a training about sort of bringing DEI to their own committees or commissions, and like, what does that look like, and how do you even begin to think about sort of equity work within a committee? And I think it would be really interesting to have the DEI Commission and the coalition work together to bring that kind of a training to town. So I'm starting to look into that, but if that's something the commission is interested in, we could certainly talk more about that.
Yeah. Personally, I think that sounds like a great idea. I don't want to speak for the full commission, but certainly I would be happy to support that work and to collaborate with them. Andrea, yes, please.
Erin, I'm sorry, what type of training? You mentioned.
So that Lincoln, there's a Lincoln organization in Lincoln that brought a training that was sort of, my understanding of it, very basic understanding, is sort of starting to make a plan, a DEI plan for the work within your committee or organization, and why it's important, and how you would even begin to get started on making a plan of what to do. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Thank you. Yep. Sorry, Rose, please.
Yeah, and so I was the DEI Commission representative present at the meeting. And so as just to underline that it was a really, what was generated through your leadership, Rob, and then now led by Erin, was a really wonderful composition of various facets of the community around advancing this work. So I think any way we can work in collaboration, I think would be really meaningful and impactful.
Agreed. Thank you. Just one other major item on the agenda is it's mentioning that we had some members whose terms expired this spring. Alex Fernandez and Erica Prahl, two dear friends. Matt's on again. Oh boy, Matt, what I do?
No, I'm just here in case you need help from the select board.
Like Pavlov's dog, Matt. You go on, and I'm like, oh boy.
No.
Alex Fernandez, Ha and I had conversations with Alex Fernandez and Erica Prahl, and for a number of reasons, both Erica and Alex decided not to, go back up for nomination for another term. I think. Okay, Alex is a great friend who is juggling graduate school and work, and is getting married this summer, which is really exciting. 1 second, please. And then Erica Prahl just welcomed a baby boy not that long ago, so she certainly has her hands full, and everyone's doing well there. But I just wanted to note, since we're all here, that I'm very grateful for the time and the energy that they committed to some of the formative meetings of this commission. And although they weren't here for very long, it was great to have their perspective and their ideas. So I wanted to thank them publicly for having them serve on this commission. We are actively in recruiting phase with the recruiting process. As we said earlier, we're excited that Kristen has fresh off the finishing up on the planning board, decided to jump right back in here with us. And so we're excited to have Kristen on the committee. And for those of you who know folks in town, I think it's a great opportunity to have conversations and to not only share what we're doing as a commission, but to actively solicit interest from folks and have them fill out the volunteer card through the town so that we can have conversations about having them join us in this work. I think there's likely a lot of interest, and it would be great to know, it would be great to meet some people that way. So please, with all that spare time we all don't have, please go out there and find some really great people. So G, please.
Rob, I have a question. Maybe you can answer, maybe Matt can answer since Matt is here. So Matt, I know when we first, the commission first started, there's a wide interest, wide range of interest from the community. So now we are seeing things to our members term expired, we're seeking new members. So will you inform me whether those members applied it before will be reconsidered, or do people need to reapply? I want to be educated on that.
Well, gee, I think that's a good point, that we should look back at those who did apply originally. And I wouldn't take it for granted, given the status of our database for volunteers, that they would necessarily automatically be reconsidered.
Right.
Though I know that if I look back through my email archives, I could probably find the applications that came in. So yeah, that's a good idea, is to take a look at that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another suggestion for Rob. Rob, do you think we can write a thank you to those 2 members who are about to leave us? Okay.
I think that's a really sweet idea. Absolutely. I think they would appreciate that.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Well, and I believe there's the third is Annabelle.
Excuse me, I forgot, because thank you, Annabelle. We had a small farewell for Annabelle at our last meeting in February, who's Annabelle's going to school, and she was an incredible voice for us. I think her perspective, having just graduated CCHS, I think was really helpful. And I know that there is a desire for us to have a young voice on the commission to the extent that we can. And so I think that can be really powerful for us. And so if you know students, I'm particularly thinking students who might be taking gap years in between high school and college, folks right out of college that are in town, I think to the extent that we can leverage that demographic, I think that would be really awesome. Thank you for reminding me, Matt. Andrea, please.
Do they have to have a certain age, or can we actually consider like actual students, like high school students?
So to be voting members, they have to be, Concord voters.
Okay.
So the 18.
18 and up. Okay.
Yep.
Which is students who graduated, right?
Typically, yeah, they'd be
right?
seniors
Okay.
or gap year, and while we typically make a 3-year appointment, I think we have to recognize with that demographic, hey, if we get a year, that's wonderful. I'm fine with, working through that.
Yeah. Annabelle gave us, I think, 4.5 really strong months worth of meetings, and it was her voice was so so that I would say that that's a really good investment on our part. All right, thank you, everybody. Is there any new business? Okay, I do want to open up now to, I know we've been doing public comments throughout, but I want to open explicitly to public comments. Tanya, please.
I want to say thank you for a wonderful meeting, so heartfelt and so much real stuff from everyone. That's great. I am so impressed with the climate survey, and maybe you might change the title to so people don't mistake it for like environmental climate kind of thing, which I did. And about the voting age, Matt, didn't we pass some bylaw a couple of years ago that in Concord people can vote if they are 17? I'm not sure.
They
there was
proposed
something like
it.
that.
Yeah,
It didn't
it's
pass.
a home rule petition,
Oh,
and
okay.
it just expired.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but it didn't
and
pass.
we didn't get very good support from our state senator. So I don't anticipate it moving forward. So
I see.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's so moving just to follow this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Any other thoughts and comments from the public or members of the commission? I know it's getting late. Neither of my girls are asleep. Erin, yes, please.
And my kins aren't either. Yeah. So Rob, I just wanted to follow up on, you mentioned sort of moving quickly with a couple of the subcommittees. Is there an expected date for the next full committee meeting, given that we're heading into the summer? What are the expectations around that?
Yeah, so this is where things get a little spicy, right? Because I think students are about to stop school, and that puts a different strain on families. I also recognize that getting subcommittees together might take some time, and so my ideal would be that our next meeting would happen, our next full commission meeting would happen certainly in June, likely toward the end of June, so that subcommittees have an opportunity to meet at the beginning and middle of June. And that gives Andrea time to also draft the letter response. But I also recognize that we want to get a letter out as soon as possible as well. And so I'd really hope, and I will do my best to make myself available to have a full commission meeting set up within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Let's go, Kristen, then Andrea, please.
Question for Matt. Will all committees need to meet in person? Do you know, or can we continue to meet by Zoom?
So last I heard, the legislature had extended the virtual meeting exception until July 15th.
Okay.
So at least for the June meetings, everything's fine for meeting virtually. You know, there is pending legislation to extend things further. But, you know, given the experience last time where they approved the extension the day after it expired, creating chaos, you know, I'm not holding my breath until July.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, right now there's an amendment to the budget for extending it to December of 2023.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be very helpful, I think.
But you're right. I think that's not going to happen until the very last moment.
Or even maybe the moment after.
That's right. I just want to alert you to the school committee schedule for the remainder of the year. So our last meeting is June 14th.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
And we don't have another meeting scheduled to August 23rd at this time.
Great. Thank you for that, Cynthia.
Sure.
Andrea, please.
So the draft of the response, I was thinking maybe I could share it next week. As soon as next week, I wasn't expecting it to be like in a whole month. Matt, I guess my question would be, is that okay? What format, since we're not meeting, what format should we use to work? I mean, I'm just because, you know, the urgency of it, or are you all okay working on it and talking about it until like a month from now and then make changes? What if that goes to like the other meeting, like on July? Isn't that a little long?
Yes.
So, I mean, the difficulty too is in terms of managing review comments. So, you know, if you publish a draft document, individuals could send you individually their feedback, but then, you know, you would not publish the revision until it was, you know, available to everyone. That to avoid creating a deliberation among the commission members. So that's another reason to perhaps meet sooner rather than later, because it gives an opportunity to actually do more of a group review, which you can't do outside of a meeting.
Yeah. So I wonder if I amend what I proposed earlier, because I do think this is the top priority here is this response, right? And so if we, oh God, the today's the 26th. If we plan, so I know that folks have crazy schedules coming up, and Andrea, I don't want to rush your process, but if you said you'd have a draft put together by next week, you believe?
I think so. I mean, you know, considering the urgency, I think we should try for next week.
Okay. And we can put this out over email, but if it's possible to gather as a commission late next week even, to talk through this and to knowing that time is of the essence, that might be prudent. I don't know what folks think here. I know, again, this is a tough time of year with end of schooling and stuff like that. And I want to be sensitive to that, but also be aware of the moment that we're in and make sure we respond accordingly. Okay. So what I can do is after this meeting, send out an email and propose some dates, and hopefully we can get some responses soon, because we'll have to turn it around quickly to make sure we get it to the town, and we can work on that very quickly.
It would seem like you could even meet as late as like June 8th or 9th, assuming that you're not going to get, rewrite the letter in the meeting, that if there's a general consensus that, yeah, this is okay, just change this or that, and it's very concrete feedback, then you could approve the letter with the changes as discussed, so there's no ambiguity,
right? And
then it could be sent. And so it would still arrive in advance. It would also need to arrive a few days in advance of the school committee meeting, so it could be distributed to the members, and also potentially be on the agenda, though who knows, it might not get on the agenda. It might just be correspondence.
Mm-hmm. It would be ideal if it got on the agenda. And I know that with it being in June 14th, we want to make sure that to the extent that we can get that finalized with enough time that it does get to the school board with clarity and efficiently. So I think the idea is that we will try to meet very soon as a full commission, and I will do my best to make myself available. And I know everyone's got very crazy schedules, but I think that's going to be important. Okay. Is there other business? Did I miss anything? Yeah, Kristen, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wondered, is it possible that this commission will be able to establish like a monthly meeting, so that for the whole year? I know everybody's schedules are crazy, but it's one of the things that perhaps if we could put it on the calendar and know it for the year, we might be able to plan around it.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a great idea. I am not in a position right now personally to be able to make that commitment, but I think I wonder if folks would be okay putting that on the next meeting's agenda. That buys us a week or 10 days to look ahead a little bit and try to solidify some of those dates for the next year. That makes a lot of sense, Kristen. Thank you. Okay, I'll make sure that gets on the next meeting agenda. Monthly. Okay, I'm preparing to have the next long meeting of my evening, putting a 4 and a 7-year-old to bed. But thank you everybody for taking the time and talking through this. I'm grateful that we were able to meet, and apologize that we weren't able to do this earlier. We have a lot of work to do, and it's important, exciting work. So I wanted to say thank you for everybody here, and for Matt for offering us procedural and moral guidance and support. So thank you for that, Matt. And welcome, Kristen. We're super, super excited to have you, and thank you for your thoughts. Can I get a motion to adjourn? All right, moved. Second. All right.
You can actually just declare the meeting's over.
It sounds so much more fun, Matt, to do it that way, but you're right. I'm going to declare it over. Friends, thank you guys so much. I wish you all good health and a very restful long weekend. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Good night.
Thank
Bye.
you.